Hey, I'm Ty Newton, back again to answer more questions about my debut album, The Future Isn't What It Used to Be. I shared the album early with friends and music enthusiasts that I know to get their questions for me to answer for you. By the way, can we all agree that social media is a terribly unreliable way to actually keep in touch with the things that we care about? I know that when I share something, a tiny fraction of those who are actually genuinely interested are seeing that. So if you do want to keep in touch and you do want reliable updates about what's happening with this album release and anything that I'll be doing after that, please join my newsletter. It's on my website. It's easy to find. Just the updates when I actually have something meaningful to share. All right, questions time. First question is actually a follow-up from the last video, not actually about the album. By the way, if any of you have any follow-up questions, or as I'm releasing the songs, if you have any questions about the music of your own, you can hit me with those in the comments, or if you're on my newsletter, go ahead and reply to my email. That actually comes to me. Kay follow-ups to ask, watching your first video, I couldn't help but notice the weird mic grip. What's up with that? Is there any reason you hold it that way? Yep, I do have a weird mic grip. I do this thing where I hold it between my middle finger and my ring finger. This is just the way that I came to hold it on stage for many years. This is actually the microphone, the SM58, that I used on stage for many years. I think it started out as sort of an expressive physicality thing that I was performing with. I think holding it between these fingers sort of allowed me to express with my hand in a way that I couldn't otherwise. And I can sort of open my hand while singing and have both hands open, or I can grip it and I don't know, it just kind of felt neat. But at this point, I think it just kind of feels like the most natural way to me. So this is just what I do. Okay, round two, question one comes from Tull. As I said before, Tull had a lot of great questions. Answering this one now because it is about the second song that I released, Simple. Tull asks, I really love those soft, tender moments in Simple. Does it make sense to say they sound more acoustic or simple? Yeah, sure it does. I mean, I think the acoustic guitar is very prominent in this song, but my whole creative process so far starts with acoustic guitar and voice. You know, many songs end up feeling like they want electric and a lot more full band instrumentation, but every single time, maybe not every single time, but almost every time that I try to just go all electric, so far at least, I end up missing that acoustic quality. I think there's something about the simplicity of having acoustic guitar and voice and that quality, and I'm just used to that being part of the music. And so I end up blending the two a lot, and that's exactly what's happening in Simple. But there isn't a song on this record that doesn't have acoustic guitar in it. Anyway, Simple definitely has like a softer, cleaner blend, and yeah, if it gives it a more simple vibe, then I think that fits the song. Despite the fact that I think anyone would agree it's got a lot going on. It's a pretty busy arrangement. I bet a contributing factor to that perception that it's more acoustic comes from how present the violin, or I guess fiddle, is in that song as well. Although that one might technically be a viola. Speaking of violin and viola, that relates to another question, so I'll circle right back on that. Question two comes from Kay again. These first two rounds are dominated by Kay and Tull because they hit me with a bunch of questions right off the bat. I promise I'll be getting to questions from others soon too. Kay asks, can you talk about all the weird percussion I'm hearing? I didn't recognize a lot of it. Oh yeah, most of the percussion on the record, with the exception of cymbals and some actual body percussion, is actually found sounds I sampled, processed, and programmed throughout the record. Simple in particular, the song I mean, is full of knocks on wooden doors, smacks on electric baseboard radiators, cardboard boxes, kitchen objects. The deep booms are actually a rubber mallet on a washing machine, and a lot of this stuff is used throughout the record, by the way. Some of them are more processed than others, so they don't all sound exactly like themselves. In a lot of songs, the drums sound pretty much like a drum kit, but they are actually these sounds, except for the cymbals. To create the toms, for instance, I actually blended that washing machine boom with an empty coffee creamer bottle, which is not mine, by the way. I don't drink coffee. I just have good people hooking me up with awesome found sounds. And, I don't think that any of these are like particularly innovative. Found sound percussion is not a new idea, but when I was thinking about how I wanted to handle percussion in my music several years ago at this point, I'm not a drummer, and I knew I kind of wanted to do this project all on my own, as much as possible. I may collaborate with percussionists and drummers someday, but at this point, this is just really what I wanted to do. And look, I could have programmed sample libraries of drum kits that are readily available, and that would have sounded great. But I realized that if I started sampling these found sounds, I could come up with a percussion style that is mine. And even with the songs that really felt like they called for a drum kit, again, those are actually found sounds manipulated to sound quite a bit like a drum kit. And at a certain point, I started thinking, okay, if I'm making these sound so much like a drum kit, then why am I not just using a drum kit? But in the end, no other drum kit sounds quite like this drum kit. Some of them definitely sound way better, but I kind of like this one. It's mine. Getting back to the percussion in Simple, though, this song really felt like the type that didn't call for a drum kit exactly. It's sort of this amalgamation of all these different percussion pieces. If I were to ever try to recreate the arrangement with other musicians live, we would have to figure out how to create some semblance of the sounds that I made with percussion instruments that we have available. And I have no idea what that would be like. That could be a fun project someday. One more question from Kay today. Kay asks, did you really play all those instruments yourself? I did. Technically, I played and/or programmed everything that you hear. Every voice is mine. I played guitar, bass, and keyboard controlling various software instruments. To be clear, I do not play violin or cello, and as I mentioned, I am not a percussionist. The strings you hear throughout the record are all SWAM instruments, SWAM, which are physically modeled software instruments from an Italian company called Audio Modeling. So, physically modeled software instruments. What this means is, unlike many software instruments that are actually based on samples of real instruments and end up with these gigantic libraries that take up so much storage space, a good explanation, I think, of physical modeling is sort of like the way 3D rendering works, where they model the way that light might reflect off of a 3D surface in some animation. It could be in games, it could be in movies. It's basically doing that with sound. We're talking about modeling the shape of the instrument, the materials, and the sound of the vibration running through all of that. Someone out there has a way better explanation than I can give you. And it is very cool. I highly suggest that you go check into it. As I mentioned last time, there's no generative AI involved in my music whatsoever. And I feel like it's important to address that because it's become so prevalent so quickly. But actually, I was using these instruments for quite a few years before releasing this music and before all the generative AI stuff blew up. I actually performed and programmed every nuance of the performances. And if you're a violinist or cellist and you're wondering why they sound so bad and unrealistic, yep, that's why. But in the end, I think, like all software instruments, physically modeled instruments like SWAM are really their own thing. And while they do set out to realistically imitate real instruments, I just think it's really cool what you can create with them as they are. There are many input devices for controlling all of the dimensions that you need to get a somewhat realistic performance out of the physically modeled SWAM instruments. One of the ways that I do it is, in addition to having my hand on the keyboard for the melody, I actually use this very cool input device called a Touché. This is by a company called Expressive E. I may be pronouncing that wrong. It's a French company, and I do not speak French. And I'll just show you, I'll have to put the mic down, but what you do is, well, maybe I can do it. You actually have 4 dimensions. This pill-shaped rocker switch goes side to side and leans, or else kind of leans side to side and pushes forward and back. I believe it's actually magnetic, and so it doesn't really wear out. It's fantastic. And so with that, you can control a few parameters all at the same time. There are people who are way more skilled musicians than I, doing way cooler things than I am with this stuff. So if you're curious, I definitely recommend checking into it. All right, that's it for me this time. Lots more questions coming soon. Thank you so much for the fantastic questions, everyone. And again, if you have any follow-up questions of your own, you can send those to me in comments or in whatever channels you have. Again, my favorite way would be my newsletter. You can literally reply to my emails and those will come directly to me. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time. Okay, follow-ups to ask. I could